Good evening, everyone. And if you're watching, this is live with Red Dot Diva. And tonight we are going to talk about the sequel to Joker movie, which was just released this week. So since it's already evening, some of you are just chilling around. You could maybe just sit in and watch me on Facebook and YouTube, as well as my guest, my geek bro Jedd, when we'll be talking about the Joker 2 movie. And in case you are not familiar with me, I'm a Red Dot Diva. I uh, I do live streams from time to time, and I started that during the COVID lockdown. So this year I've been a bit lax because I've been so busy adulting at work. But I still like to do movie reviews from time to time. I think a lot of the movie reviews are from content creators in the Western world, and they're really loud in the social media, especially from one certain country because their population is huge and everybody uses social media there. And so by doing movie reviews like this, regardless if people stumble upon my content, you get to hear some of our localized Southeast Asian opinions, and maybe they are similar to the ones that you see from more famous content creators, but maybe not as well. So I'm going to welcome my one of my favorite guests, my geek bro, Jedd, on the screen, and I'm going to let him introduce himself to you. Hello,
Hello, hi
Jedd.
Tina. Yes, thank you so much for having me on as a guest. So the last time I was on your live stream, we did a movie review of Deadpool and Wolverine
Oh
together with
yes, that
our
was fun.
mutual friend John. John can't join us tonight, but
Hmm.
yeah. So I am Jedd. I'm a writer. I'm a contributor. I write for a company called Sparfex, and it's an in-flight entertainment systems company. So I mainly write for Chris World, which is the in-flight entertainment magazine of Singapore Airlines. I used to
Mm,
write for F Magazine when F Magazine existed. I
so
used to write
sad.
for InSync when InSync existed. I've written for other places like Catchplay Plus. I What else have I done? I've done a bunch of things here and there, but usually around the realm of writing and talking about movies. I've also been on the radio
Yes.
as a regular guest on Kiss 92 FM, talking about movies. So
Yes.
yeah, Tina and I, we see each other from time to time at movie screenings and things like that. But we have also both of us have fallen off of some of the invitation lists, so a bit harder to see each other. But I'm grateful that I was able to go and get to see this movie, and
Mm,
yeah, this is something that we had been talking about. I think after Deadpool and Wolverine, like what is the next kind of big comic book movie that we wanted to talk about?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And hi to John, who's in happily in Japan right now.
Yeah, have a good holiday, John.
He's
Yeah,
having a
enjoy
good
yourself.
holiday. He's our comic book expert. He reads like
Yes.
almost every title you can think of, and his memory of these comic books is just beyond my. Oh,
So
you
that's
want
what
to
we'll
know
be
anything
missing
about
tonight.
comics? Yeah, you can ask him. And his handle is Thought Dusk. So you can find it on Instagram and I think on Twitter as well. Although most of us have fallen off from that uh, formerly known as Twitter platform, because it's like literally. All right. We will do this as usual with our other movie reviews so that we have a certain format that people are comfortable with. And the first thing we do is Jedd giving us a synopsis, a spoiler-free synopsis of Joker Folie. And also, we will try to remain spoiler-free as much as possible for the first half of this session, about 30 minutes. And then I'll give the warning that we'll talk about, things that are more spoilery in nature on the second half of this live stream. So, Jedd, go ahead, give your synopsis of the sequel.
Joker Folie is the sequel to 2019's Joker. So that movie was set in its own universe, so separate from any other DC property. It's not set in the DC extended universe. It's not set in the Matt Reeves or the Pattinson universe. It's in its own world that was very much inspired by 1970s, early 80s Martin Scorsese movies. So imagine the world of Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and The King of Comedy. So in that movie, Joaquin Phoenix played Joker, Arthur Fleck, And at the end of that movie, he was arrested for his crimes,
Yep.
including killing the TV talk show host Murray Franklin on live TV. So this movie is set 4 years later, and he is in prison in Arkham State Hospital awaiting trial for his crimes. So while he's in prison one day, he passes by in the other block and he sees there's a class, a music class that's being held by the inmates, for the inmates in the lower security ward. And one of them is a woman named Lee Quintzel, played by Lady Gaga. And so they form this connection. The next time he is brought to the class and she starts to fall in love with him. So the movie unfolds as a courtroom drama where he is on trial for his crimes and he's represented by a lawyer played by Catherine Keener, and he's prosecuted by the assistant DA Harvey Dent, played by Harry Lottie. And now he has Lady Gaga, her version of Harley Quinn, as his biggest supporter. And the movie is also a musical. It unfolds in musical sequences that take place in Joker's head and also in Harley Quinn's head. So the title Folie, it is a French term that means madness for two, or shared madness, shared delusion. So that is my spoiler-free review, spoiler-free synopsis of Joker Folie.
Yeah, and the movie is long. I think that's the main takeaway I came out from it. I mean,
it's about 2 hours 40 minutes. 130.
It was it was really too long. It would have worked better if it was cut shorter, like more concise, because it did drag towards the middle to the third, fifth, I guess, around that part was a bit draggy and repetitive in a sense. That's how I felt. What about you?
Yeah, so the context is the movie has been out for a few days and people hate it. Generally, the reviews from critics have been negative generally, but also the reaction from fans, especially from fans of the first movie, has been negative. So I think I am kind of lukewarm on the movie. I don't like it, but I also don't hate it. And we will talk about things we like and things we don't like a little bit later on. But yeah, I mean, for me, the main thing was when the first movie was made in 2019, it was very much made with the announcement, we are not planning any sequels. It's going to be a standalone thing.
Yeah, I remember that very well.
Our style experiment. And I think one of the things that I liked about the first movie is that it felt like a fan film. And I don't say this in a derogatory way, in the sense that a fan film can get away with stuff that the studio might put the kibosh on, might say, no, you're not allowed to do this with our characters, with our IP, with our franchise. So that was a movie that went and did things with the Batman mythology and the Joker character that I thought were interesting because, okay, ordinarily you wouldn't be allowed to use them in this way. And being set in its own universe, its own kind of little silo, means that you don't have to worry about interconnectivity, you don't have to worry about continuity, and you don't have to worry about consistency of style. It can kind of be its own thing. So I feel like the big problem is the main reason, if not only reason, that the sequel exists is the first movie made $1 billion. So the first movie was like the first R-rated movie to cross $1 billion. And since then it has been eclipsed by Deadpool and Wolverine. But that was a huge I think like a much bigger success than Warner Brothers even thought was possible. And it went on to be a major awards play. It was nominated for many, many Oscars. I think maybe it was 11, and it won 2. Yeah. It won for Best Score by Hilda Goodman-Dottir, and it won Best Actor, Best in the Leading Role, for Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah. So naturally, it's like, okay, now we have to do a sequel. So it feels like I don't think there was a very good motivation for a sequel, which you can also say of any other franchise thing. But I guess Joker was supposed to be different. And I think, to be fair to the first movie, it did leave the door open. There was a possibility of, okay, we're going to see what happens. But then if you take this and look at it as a sequel, it very much is just kind of, in its structure, rehashing the events of the first movie because it's a courtroom drama. And it feels like the characters every 5 minutes have to remind you about what happened in the first movie. Like, yeah, he killed these people. And then they show you some flashbacks. Hey, he killed these people on a train. And they keep talking about it in a way that it doesn't feel like it really moves the character forward.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because
The
it is
plot was
still
a bit
stuck. Yeah.
thin, like either you're watching a TV show on a big screen, in a more flashy way because of the direction and being a jukebox musical kind of thing. But yeah, it was like any other procedural TV shows that you see, CBS type
CBS,
Law and
yeah.
Order.
Law, Law and Order Gotham City. Yeah, and I mean, the way that it uses the lore, like really the only other Batman thing it's doing is Harvey Dent, is using the
Yeah,
character of Harvey Dent.
correct. But then he
In the
also
first
didn't appear
movie,
very
they
much.
didn't,
So,
yeah, it
yeah,
was just, in the first movie, they were doing okay, we had Thomas Wayne as a character, you saw Alfred, you saw young Bruce Wayne, there was an interaction
yeah,
between Arthur Fleck and the young Bruce Wayne. And in this movie, it felt like they weren't really touching a lot of the other Batman elements, except of course Harley Quinn. So that was
but
the
he
thing that
wasn't
made
really
me,
Harley Quinn either.
yeah. So that's the whole thing, right? When they announced Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn, I was very excited.
Me
I
too.
was like,
Yeah,
this is great. She is a theater kid,
it could
right?
work.
She has this
Yeah.
big theater kid energy. Her performance style is
Mm,
very
mm.
theatrical. She is a very talented musician and artist, and of course, like, I really liked her in A Star Is Born, and I feel like she hasn't done a huge amount of acting work after that. It was like that and House of Gucci. That was maybe her highest profile movie after that with Adam Driver. And then since then, I was kind of like, what could you put Lady Gaga in that would leverage this star quality that she has? And so attaching her to Harley Quinn to me made a lot of sense. And then the movie doesn't know what to do with her. It doesn't
Yeah,
really
exactly.
have a handle on the character. It doesn't really have an angle that it wants to approach the character with. And I mean, when we talk about Harley Quinn, this is a character who was created in 1992. And Joker was a character who was created in 1940. So Harley Quinn has been around for a much shorter time than Joker, but in that time has had a huge impact and is basically like caught up with
Correct.
Joker.
Yeah, he's like when you look at Joker, you will remember about Harley Quinn because of their escapades, wreaking havoc in Gotham and their so-called toxic romance, that kind of thing, that classic story of the villains, Bonnie and Clyde kind of thing in the DC world. So yeah, I just wonder, like, okay, we're kind of going to the territory of what we don't like first. I guess we needed to vent about that. uh, because
I
both of
didn't
us
hate
are,
it, honestly.
no, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you. I didn't hate the movie. I went there with a lot of. I read the preliminary reviews as always before I go to watch a movie, so that I can moderate kind of like, my expectations. And yeah, a lot of the critics didn't like it, and of course the fans were all review bombing it in Rotten Tomatoes and on most social media. Um, and they're I have to say they're mostly guy fans. Yeah, so they were saying, "Oh, this is nonsense. It was terrible. Very negative, extreme negativity on what the Joker 2 movie was about." So I went in there with very, very little expectations watching the movie. Uh, but it wasn't so bad actually. It was long. I did get slightly like twitchy, around the past the second 65% of the movie and 70 to 75% of the movie. I was like, oh, this is getting a bit draggy and
Yeah, so
repetitive,
like in
as
the
you said.
second act,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like, I could have watched like another episode of Law and Order or something like this. With more interesting stories, and then after that, when it ended, I was like, oh, okay, that we'll talk about that later. I was like, okay, then what's the point of it all? But
Yeah.
as a movie on its own, it wasn't so horrible. I mean, you're not saying like you're watching a C grade or B grade movie with terrible art direction and terrible performances. No, it wasn't. It was actually, if you don't think of it as a Joker movie and a study on somebody's psyche, deteriorating mental health, that kind of thing, it could be interesting, as a depiction with the musicals going on in his head and the performance, the depiction of his mental state. But the thing is, I think we also talk about that behind the scenes before these live streams. Like, then why call it Joker? You get what I mean? Because then it's not a DC character that we all know. Not that we want, and actually in that sense also, do we actually want a movie about Joker creating havoc all around Gotham without a superhero on hand to balance it out? You get what I mean? It's like, do we really need a Joker movie per se? I don't think that is healthy state of mind as well, just to have a villain running amok and creating anarchy in everywhere. I think that doesn't serve any purpose either. I think which is why we are talking about it as a sequel to the first movie, whereby there were a lot of reactions from certain groups of people who were all out, like, oh, I have this excuse then to be violent because Joker was in a bad state of mind due to his background and his the abuse that he suffered. I feel that he has a legit reason, and even though maybe I don't suffer as much as him, I also have a legit reason. So
I think the first movie, it very much follows in the footsteps of Taxi Driver, which it is explicitly patterned after, and then also things like Fight Club and American Psycho and Falling Down, where a lot of people can very easily take the wrong message away from it, because it is a story about a disenfranchised man who is mistreated by society. He has mental illness and he gets bullied and picked on, and then he decides to react to it by developing this persona of Joker. So the crux of the second movie of Folie Deux is this idea, we're litigating whether or not Arthur is a separate personality from Joker, whether he can be held accountable for his crimes, or is it a case of like dissociative identity disorder, there's Joker come up and Arthur's not in control, how much responsibility and accountability does he have, right? So I think that is one of the questions that is central to the second movie, but it also feels like, I agree with what you're saying, where I think Joker always exists usually in reaction to Batman and in tension with Batman. And the fun of seeing Joker is seeing how he reacts to Batman, how Batman reacts to him, how he's always trying to pull one up on Batman, get the better of Batman. And Batman is so serious, and Joker is, he's chaotic. He's doing it because he finds it funny. He doesn't care. And Batman has to stop him, but he has fun toying with Batman, playing with Batman. So when you have a Joker in a world where Batman doesn't exist yet, which is a little bit like what happened with Gotham with the TV series, then the dynamic, it changes. So I guess and the question is, this is a Joker movie, but is it about Joker? It's about a character called Arthur Fleck.
Yes, exactly.
Calls himself Joker, but there's basically very little resemblance with the comics, because the comics have offered us at different times different origin stories for Joker, but there are several versions where they're just like, we won't give you a clear origin, and it's kind of scarier that way. Dark Knight, the Heath Ledger version notably being one where they avoided telling you what his story was, and he actually plays with that by he gives you different accounts of his childhood and his past, but maybe he's making all of them up. Maybe he's making some of them up and you don't know. So giving a definitive origin to the character is a way to humanize him and make him more grounded. But it also takes away this element of him being a fantastical agent of chaos, like a kind of manifestation of evil. So I think it's a Joker where you're not allowed to have fun with the character. You're not allowed to find the character fun, because there are other versions where he does these horrible things, but he's having fun doing them. Obviously, like the Mark Hamill animated series version of Joker.
Oh yeah, that's
that
one
is
of the
one
iconic
where,
ones.
because they are hampered by certain standards of things they can't show in a cartoon, so it cannot be graphic, but he still does terrible things. And of course, that is where the origin of Harley Quinn is. And that story is told in Mad Love, which was first like a comic book story in the Batman Adventures, and then it was adapted into an episode of the TV show. And so the classic dynamic is that Harley Quinn is a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum,
Yes.
and she is assigned to Joker, and Joker manipulates her.
Yeah.
And by the end of that, she falls in love with Joker, but
Mm.
it is an obsession with him.
Yes.
And so all of the different comics and TV shows and movies since then have always been examining the relationship between Joker and Harley, and a lot of stories about her breaking away from him and
Yes.
realizing that she doesn't need him and going off and having her own adventures, or getting a poison ivy, or all of these other stories that can happen, or even stories in which she reforms, in which she becomes a
Yeah.
hero.
Yeah. I mean, because times were different then as well. So the view, I mean, you have to say that most comic book writers at that time were male anyway. So this is also their fantasy, of how a woman falls in love with a villain, and how a woman gets trapped into this kind of dysfunctional relationship. Which I can't say that it doesn't happen. Yes, it does. But again, also it's not a kind of thing that you want to promote as something to your young viewers or young readers. And so, I guess it's interesting that they decide to, I mean, DC Comics in a way in this decade or so has made Harley evolve in a more positive aspect. And there's a story to that about how she gets out from this kind of relationship, how she progresses, and how she learns how to appreciate and love people in a more healthy way. Anyway, that's about Harley, right, in the comics. So in the movie, it's like if you watch Shin Godzilla, the Godzilla that appeared, it was like a embryonic form with a big head and the googly
The
eyes
bulging
and
eyes, yeah.
very bulging eyes, and the skin is pale, and it is like what I feel that this Harley is, like a
It's like kind of an
like a
unformed
yeah
Harley. Yeah.
unformed version of a Harley Quinn that we know of. And I don't even know whether this is the Harley Quinn that is, um if there were going to be a continuation, which I hope they don't, because I think this ends at a very weird point that shouldn't continue. Whether she evolves into something else. And but yeah, it's not the Harley Quinn that we know or we love from the books and the TV shows that we watch. But having said that, I have to say that the two of them have a very good chemistry though. They they
I
they do. It was okay
yeah, I
lah. I
think
mean,
I feel like fundamentally both of them are good performers,
yeah,
and so they were taking the assignment seriously. I feel like
yeah,
they were both trying, and especially Gaga was matching kind of the energy that Joaquin Phoenix had established in the first movie. And also in this second movie, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is more muted. There's less, like,
yes,
because he has these outbursts of uncontrollable laughter in
yeah,
the first movie, but they don't do that in this one. They didn't
mm,
really explain why, whether or not that goes away if it's medication or what. But yeah, I think the the idea in this movie is very much that uh your like you were mentioning earlier, that there are a lot of people who kind of idolize this version of Joker, and I feel like the approach to the character in this one is trying to say that he's actually kind of pathetic. He's not a hero, but at the same time, you are also supposed to feel pity for him. He is mistreated
yeah,
by all of
right,
these characters, including like the prison guard, the main prison guard
yeah,
played by Brendan Gleeson in the movie. So this character of Harley is like, oh, here is somebody who loves him and worships him, and at the same time, it takes away the usual dynamic that is Joker manipulates Harley, because
mm,
in this movie they are both inmates at Arkham, when traditionally she is his psychiatrist, and he then
psychiatrist, yes,
twists her mind
yeah,
around, right? So, but then in this movie, we can get into it in the spoilers, and they're like, is there
yeah,
something that she's hiding? Is there something that she's not? But
yeah,
the relationship is very much she worships him, and that's it. So it feels like
yeah,
they're not really interested in giving Harley agency. It's kind of
correct.
like she's a
She's
prop, but it
yeah,
also, I think they're also going into that idea of like serial killers having women fans, kind of like all of the women who wrote Ted Bundy
yeah, yeah, yeah,
letters when he was in
yeah,
prison. And Lady Gaga said that she based her performance off of the Manson family. So, like Lynette from
yeah, yeah,
that, you see fictionalized in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So that is like the kind of mode that she's in, like this sort of like Stockholm syndrome thing. And stylistically, I think they're also doing a lot of kind of 60s influences. Like there's a bit of like the Twiggy kind of look, you know, in some of the
Correct.
dressing that she has. And she and Joker, in one of the fantasy sequences, they host like a variety show that's a bit like the Sonny and Cher show. So it's going into these cultural influences that is building on the first movie being very much late 70s, early 80s Scorsese. So there are some things in the movie that I think, okay, you know, we're having a bit of fun with drawing from these other influences, but it also doesn't really go far enough. I feel like it's a bit half-hearted about being a musical, but it's definitely a musical. You cannot call it not a, when they were marketing it and promoting it, they were trying to say, like Todd Phillips was trying to say, it's not a musical, but it is a musical, you know.
Oh, it's like confusing, right? The way they market this show as well, and then how people actually didn't realize that it was actually a musical.
And I think that's a big part of the hatred towards it.
Yeah,
People feel they have been tricked into watching a
correct. I
musical
think
against their
they were
will.
expecting, you know, like full-on violence, like a action thriller, but it's not actually. Coming back to the point about saying about the movie that is about Joker, that is not really about called Joker, but it's not really about Joker.
Yeah.
The things that and I found it too long. So what I'm saying is that if you didn't have the expectation that the movie was actually about this character that you know from your cartoons and Heath Ledger's performance, or in the Batman universe, or in the comics that you read, it is actually an interesting depiction of a person's decline in mental state and what it you know, what are the things that he suffers and how people react to him, and some of the motivations that cause some people to act this way. I did read somebody who posted on Threads, who was a psychologist, and he thought that the movie was quite an interesting um, visual interpretation of what this kind of people view in their lives. And that was
Yeah.
quite interesting because, I mean, if you see it that way, unfortunately, most of us, you know, who are movie lovers or pop culture lovers, we want to see the Joker that we like. So that was a disappointment, actually. I didn't really like the first movie as well. I went in there also with not much expectation. I do appreciate as what Todd Phillips is trying to convey in terms of the visual ideas, like the sets, the costumes, you know. Joaquin's performance, I cannot say it's horrible. I mean, he really did a really good job. But it wasn't a movie that I enjoyed. As you said, this movie also is not something that I really particularly enjoyed. You know, it was like, okay, I know it wasn't terrible like what other people said, but when you come off the movie, you don't really like, oh, I want to watch it again. No, I'm not really lah. You know, it
Yeah,
was a
I
bit
think, you know,
depressing, and the first one was really depressing to me because I don't I'm generally a person with quite healthy mental state, and I usually not very negative. So
I
then
will
to
not
be proud
comment
by
on my
the
mental
yeah,
state.
I was like, oh gosh.
Yeah,
This
like my reaction to
stress.
the first movie, right, was I felt, okay, this is pretty well made, but I do not want comic book movies to be like this. I don't want
Mm,
everyone to look at this and go, okay, this is
yeah,
our model. Now let's go and do, you know, this kind of like dark and
more
gritty
dreary movies.
interpretation, which I feel also a part of it is taking the wrong lessons away from the Dark Knight trilogy,
Mm,
where like a lot of people feel like, oh, Dark Knight was successful because it was serious, it was realistic, which is reductive and is not necessarily, you know, why exactly it worked.
but it wasn't depressing though,
Yeah,
you know,
there
Dark
there are
Knight
still, I
trilogy.
think you could still buy into the
Yeah,
reality of the world, even though it
correct.
was less fantastical than
Exactly.
the Tim Burton and the Joel Schumacher movies. There's still more fantastical elements. You still had Bane, you know, you still had
Yeah, yeah.
some version of a costume that characters were wearing. So I think um one of the yeah, like you were saying earlier, this idea of how it is a psychological drama. It's about a person's mental state. In the first movie, he has all these delusions, right? He imagines being part of the audience of the Murray Franklin show. He imagines being welcomed up, and Murray Franklin says, "Actually, I'm your father." Or he imagines the whole relationship with his
Yes, with his
neighbor, right, played by
neighbor.
Zazie Beetz. So the idea is, what if you take these imaginations to their extreme? They will become musical numbers. They will become these, like, old Hollywood kind of song and dance things. So these are
Yeah,
all the things that are happening in his head. So I love musicals. I love musical theater, and I think the musical form is very interesting. But I also feel like for general audiences, they may have a very narrow definition of what a musical is. They may think that, okay, musical is very happy and silly and very
yeah.
cheesy. But there
It's
are
just song and
musicals that,
dance.
right? Yeah, it's just like,
Yeah,
you imagine the old kind of like vision
yeah,
of
Hollywood cat,
Oklahoma or My
Fred
Fair Lady or something
Astaire.
like that, right? But and yeah, and Fred Astaire, he's referenced in this movie. They show
Yes,
clips
he
from
is.
the bandwagon. They are watching it in Arkham. But musicals can have very dark subject matter. They can be very serious, and I think when the Sweeney Todd movie came out, again, a lot of people felt tricked. They didn't know it was going to be a musical when it was, of course, based on the Stephen Sondheim musical. So you can have a musical that is dark. You can have a musical that is kind of ironically juxtaposing these classic songs like this movie does with a darker subject matter. But the problem is, a lot of times when the musical sequences begin in Joker Folie Deux, it feels like it stalls the movie. When
Mm,
a musical sequence in a
mm,
musical moves the story forward.
yeah, I
But for
agree.
Joker Folie Deux, it feels like the story stops. We
Yeah,
do the musical number and then the story
yeah.
continues. And so that's what a lot of people feel very frustrated about, is why the
It's
movie
choppy, choppy,
feels
choppy,
long.
choppy. Yeah. And then after that,
Yeah,
edit,
rather
edit.
than
Next scene, next scene.
because,
Yeah, it
like,
didn't.
the a thing that I don't remember who said it, but it's like, oh, when you no longer have the words to express yourself in a musical, you sing. And so singing and dancing is like, and it is, oh, this is where the emotions are going to their logical conclusion. And Joker Folie Deux doesn't really function like that. It is like, okay, now it's time for another song, so we stop and we do another
Yeah,
song,
yeah,
which kind of, it is
agree.
frustrating because it feels like Todd Phillips, he's not a musical director, so it doesn't feel like he has the vocabulary of how to direct musical sequences, which are very difficult to do. There's so many examples of badly filmed musical movies,
Yes.
right? Where, yeah, and it's like, what are we doing here, kind of thing. So my frustration with this is that I think the device of making it a musical is not a bad idea, but the execution, I don't think it works.
Mm,
And the
yeah.
movie, there's some really interesting things that it's trying. Like, it opens with this cartoon. It opens
Mm,
with an animated shot that's done by Sylvain Chomet, who did Triplets of Belleville, the French animator, in the style of an old Looney Tunes
Looney
short.
Tunes, yes.
Yeah. So
Mm,
instead of Bugs Bunny is Joker.
yeah.
And it's kind of like planting the idea. It's called Me and My Shadow, right? It's planting the idea that there's a dark side of Arthur, who is actually the one that is controlled, and he
Yes.
is the one that went on stage and killed
Yeah.
Murray, and it's not actually Arthur's fault. But then later on, the movie is trying to answer the question: is this hypothesis true? Right? Is there the dark shadow? So I think it's doing things that, opening with that, made me feel, oh, this is very interesting. It's kind of like very unexpected way to open the movie, and it is a throwback. It is using a form and a style of animation that is very old fashioned, and it's also juxtaposing something that is like, okay, this is innocent and is for kids, but is using a very dark subject matter.
Yeah.
So I felt that, okay, if we're doing this, then I am interested to see how the musical numbers are done. And the musical numbers, I found them to be very disappointing ultimately.
Yeah, they're actually quite flat, you know.
Yep.
As you said, it's like not fully invested in the thing, on the performance of the musical, and then some of them is really okay, like the one like uh okay, we are already at the spoiler section, so beware, we might be talking about spoilers now.
Yes,
So this
past
is
this
quite
point. Yeah, that is
spoilerish, which I'm
spoilers.
gonna
Yeah.
say. The scene whereby Harley was applying makeup in the mirror and she's singing as well. That's like quite flat also, It's not, it's just she's singing. There's nothing going on else except her putting on makeup. And I can see why he says that it's not really a musical in a sense. Maybe he doesn't think, he just adds in songs during certain points of the movie but doesn't really progress the characters forward. Having said that, though, I do really like some of the lighting direction does draw you in lah. I mean, my eyes do appreciate the color scheme that he has in mind. And I think he uses that very effectively in some junctures, like the umbrella scene. I think the shots, I cannot say that Todd Phillips is a horrible director as well. Some of the shots do retain in your mind, and I judge how a director or a cinematographer does the films, whether after I watch a movie, right, a day or so, right, do I remember certain scenes in my head or not? And in Joker, certain scenes do retain in your head. So I can say that the movie is quite interestingly shot. I think he has very good visual ideas, but it just doesn't pull together in a way, with the song, with the so-called dancers, with the courtroom drama, with his trauma, visual ideas and concepts are there, but it's not cohesive in a sense in this movie, which is quite disappointing because it could have been so much better. Even though if you don't realize it's actually about a comic book character, you don't just discount that. It could be so much better.
Yeah, it's taking some risks and it's doing some interesting things, but then it's also not going far enough with it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that is the tricky thing, is when you are making a movie that is based on something that is existing material, how far do you go by departing from the material and making something new while also staying recognizable? I mean, this is always the tension of an adaptation. And we have seen this a lot in Batman movies themselves. With Tim Burton, especially in Batman Returns, it feels more like a Tim Burton movie than a Batman movie, right? The way that Catwoman and Penguin are realized on screen, they feel more like a Tim Burton characters than they are in the comics. And then, you go into Joel Schumacher, right? And then it's like, okay, we're overcorrection to make it a bit glossier and sillier and more neon. And then, okay, reset. We're now doing the more serious approach or more grounded Christopher Nolan, right? Yeah. So I think the Batman and the Batman mythology, it is flexible. You can do many different things with it. You can do many different tones. And if you look at animation, you can do Batman animated series or Batman the Brave and the Bold or the Batman, and all of those things are still recognizable as Batman. So I think you have to, like you were saying earlier, just in your head tell yourself, no, this is not the Joker. This is Arthur Fleck. So this is a universe where don't worry too much about it being a Batman universe. But then the problem is its connection to Batman is what is attracting people to watch it. So it's at war with each other, even more in this movie than the first one. Yeah.
So that's why I think, I don't fault people being disappointed, and come out with harsh reviews. That's quite valid in that sense. But also, I don't know where this is gonna go, right? With the ending that we saw.
Right. Yeah. So we can talk about spoilers.
Yeah, we're going to talk about spoilers now. So the ending was like, oh, okay. Basically, another prisoner who is also one of those who are the followers of Joker in the same prison as Arthur Fleck told him a joke and then said, you deserve, you want to get what you deserve, right? It's the same thing that he told Murray, the comedian that he killed, and then stabbed him a few times. And then Arthur Fleck slumps on the floor, and then he basically dies with the song in his head. And the other prisoner who was behind him, so he's not in the foreground, he's in the background, and he was just slicing his face, just like the Heath Ledger version, like that. And then that's it. So that's the end. By that time, Harley Quinn has already left Joker, because Arthur Fleck says that there has not ever been a Joker per se. He has always been Arthur Fleck, so he's a very traumatized person and he always wanted to end his life. And then Harley was very disappointed because she was kind of like a serial killer fangirl. and then
she was
told
infatuated with that persona,
yeah.
and Arthur was telling her the
So
persona is not real,
yeah,
and so she
it's not
kind of dumps it,
real.
basically. Yeah.
In a way of a reverse twist on the Joker influencing and corrupting the Harley Quinn that we know. In this one, it's like she uses him for her own benefit. So that was the ending, and then you start to wonder, it's like, okay, so actually it's not about Joker at all. Then why are we
Yeah.
watching this?
So the I think the ending of the first movie, you sort of saw that Arthur Fleck galvanized this revolution of
Yeah,
followers. There were other people who were all taking his example, and there was this kind of big clown riot at the end. And then in this movie, you also see other people who dress like him and wear the makeup and show up to support him at the trial. So I think the idea very much is that Arthur popularized or introduced the idea of the Joker, but he's not the literal Joker that Batman ends up fighting. So
yeah, I
in
think
this
so
movie,
too.
in this movie, it confirms that yes, he does die, but then it's implied that the inmate that kills him, played by an actor called Connor Story, he is the one who becomes the Joker. But whether or not he is actually the Joker that Batman fights, we also don't know. So I think it's this idea of symbols, right? And there was something that the Dark Knight trilogy did similarly with the character of John Blake, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt in The Dark Knight Rises, where at the end of the movie he reveals his middle name is Robin. So he is kind of like an amalgamation of the different Robins, and he's the symbol of Robin, rather than literally being Dick Grayson or Jason Todd or Tim Drake or Damian Wayne, right? He's sort of like integrating these different elements, and he is a symbolic manifestation of Robin. So in that way, Arthur Fleck is a symbolic manifestation of Joker, and then other people kind of take that symbol and run with it. But it also is a very anticlimactic ending. It kind of feels like, then
Why
what
do
will
we
we
need
hear
to
for?
suffer
Yeah,
through all that in order
because
to get the
earlier
ending?
in
Ah,
one of the fantasy scenes, right, the Joker and Harley show scene, Harley shoots him,
yes.
and like she betrays him in front of the audience, and then while they're performing and singing, and so that kind of plants the idea that, oh, what if Harley is the one who kills him in the end, which you're kind of expecting, and then no, Harley doesn't kill him. So like you were saying earlier, this version of Harley is implied that she is knowing more than she lets on. She's manipulating Joker, because we find out later that even though she's an inmate at Arkham, she's voluntarily committed.
Yeah.
She comes from a rich family. She doesn't
Very
have to be
family.
there, right? So she was and she studied psychiatry. So that is a nod to the origins of the character. So the problem with this then is that it makes Joker more of a victim. That now even Harley Quinn is manipulating him rather than him manipulating Harley. So it makes the character kind of feel more pathetic, which the goal is, the movie is almost like scolding people for idolizing him in the first movie. But then it makes him also lame. And
Yes.
you want the Joker to, you want to hate him and you want to find him
Yeah,
despicable, but
correct.
you also want him to be cool. You also want him
Yes.
to be a formidable villain
Villain,
for
yes.
Batman to face off against. And this movie takes all of that away. And it's like the Joker is a loser. He is pathetic, but you're also supposed to feel sorry for him. And some like terrible things happen to him, like he gets raped in the prison by the guards, in this movie. And it just feels like, do we really need to do all of this, right? There's also a sex scene with Joker and Harley, which is shot like very uncomfortably. It's not meant to be romantic. It's meant to look very uncomfortable. And indeed, it does make you feel very uncomfortable. I'm sort of sitting there, I was watching it in IMAX, and I was like,
Where's that cold?
what are we doing, So, and I think it kind of feels like the uncharitable reading of the movie is the big troll, that Todd Phillips is trolling the people who loved the first movie, the people who hated the first movie, and he's also trolling Warner Brothers, the studio.
Yeah, I
And
mean, does he really actually know much about the characters, or does he just want to, put on his visual ideas about
yeah,
certain
I
things
think
based on a
for
surface level kind of knowledge of the characters that he kind of
based
know?
based on his interviews, it is very much like, he was saying, I can't make comedies anymore because everybody is still politically correct, so now I'm gonna do dramas, so that kind of like his angle and approach to it
I
make people
see.
not really give him the benefit of the doubt. But also, I think DC was in a place of we are going to hear different pitches and you can come in and pitch something. And if we like it, we will green light it, which I think now is not. I don't know if that's going to be the case going forward. But I like the existence of the first Joker movie because it is playing outside the usual boundaries
Yeah.
of we must fit in the cinematic
Yes.
universe. So
Yeah.
that's why it's very conflicting and very contradictory because the final shape you're looking at it and you're like, I don't like where this ended up.
I
But some
know.
of the places along the way, okay, I thought it has potential, and especially when you say Lady Gaga is going to be Harley Quinn.
Yeah, I was
Sounds
also
great. I
thinking
want to see
that
that. Yeah.
when that sequence came about, it also caught me unawares because I didn't expect that dream sequence to happen. In the sense that Harley was betraying him with the gun, and I was like, okay, is this a foreshadowing, right? As we usually expect from this kind of thing, but no, in the end, it was just maybe he shot his heart, but that's about it. In a sense, broke his heart.
And then there's also the whole thing of she tells him she's pregnant. So we don't know whether or not that is real. They don't confirm whether or not that really happened, if it's true. But there's also this idea of like, what if she has a kid and that kid becomes the next generation of Joker, right?
Yeah, I know, right? But knowing that how things are panning out with this one, I'm pretty sure it's a lie.
Yeah,
Because
so
whatever
this
he
is like,
foreshadowed is kind of like want to foreshadow, but it's not happening. So I don't think that's gonna be a thing,
and yeah, I think like this is a universe that honestly it hits a dead end very fast. And it
Yes.
kind of feels like the dead end was the ending of the first movie. So when you watch a sequel, finally at the end, I kind of feel like I don't think there needed to be a sequel. This didn't make me mad. Like it made a lot of people really mad. Like apparently it
Nah.
has a D cinema score, which is the lowest that any comic book movie has had, like lower than the 2015 Fantastic Four. So usually, how do you get a bad cinema score? People don't like your ending. So that you leave people with kind of a bad taste in their mouth, and then they feel like, okay, I've been bamboozled, I wasted my time, and that usually happens. And a lot of movies with like an unsuccessful twist or something like that, they will get a bad cinema score. So cinema score is an exit poll, it's not necessarily like a very empirical metric, but it means that enough people are mad, are angry or upset when they leave the movie.
But I guess
So
also,
think,
nowadays with people struggling to tighten their belts, and cinema tickets aren't so cheap these days. It has
yes,
almost
so that
doubled the
is
price of what I used to remember, right? Even for GV. So
so
when you
if
pay
a
ticket and
movie,
then it doesn't come to what you expect, especially the marketing is kind of wishy-washy as well, and then I can understand
so if
why.
you perceive a movie to have wasted your time, you'll be even angrier because of the money that you spend on it. That's right. So I mean, our last review live stream that we did was about Deadpool and Wolverine. And Deadpool and Wolverine is a movie that
So
everybody,
fun.
generally everyone loved it very much. A lot of people, left feeling good about it. Of course, later there was some discourse of, is this relying too much on fan service? Are we kind of like stuck in the cul-de-sac? But the general feeling among the audience was a positive feeling. So it is very interesting to have these two movies kind of come out. And I mean, this is the only DC movie, theatrically released DC movie this year, if you don't count the Christopher Reeve documentary.
Yeah.
So because this is kind of like the break year before next year they reset.
The new
And
revamp
next year, launches the DCU with Superman.
Yes, quite excited about
in
that.
May, right? Yeah, with David Corenswet. So that is going to be its own universe. And the idea is that anything that takes place outside of that will be with the Elseworlds label. So the Matt Reeves, Batman, and Penguin, all that is Elseworlds, and then Joker's also Elseworlds. And they recently announced they're going to do an animated movie about Dick Grayson and Jason Todd. That's going to be done with puppetry and CGI. So I am very interested in that. So I want DC to keep doing like weird things, right? I want DC to do experimental things.
Yeah,
but then
actually, I really like them doing weird things because I don't want them to become another Marvel.
Yeah, the problem is that the weird thing will only be greenlit if the studio sees that there's a chance of return. So I'm sure they are having a lot of regrets about Joker 2 because they thought that it would perform just like Joker 1. That was a very, very huge success, but it is not tracking to do well at all. So, it is a bit of an unfortunate kind of thing where you feel like, is this going to scare the studio off from taking risks?
Yeah, I know,
Because
right?
usually that is the reaction, right? Something fails, and then we
Money
attribute the
talks.
failure to the wrong reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
money
So,
talks.
it's kind of a bummer, but at the
Mm,
same time, I don't feel very strongly about it either way. And you're talking to, both of us are DC fans, right? Both of us, we want DC to succeed. It has been
absolutely.
frustrating being a DC fan over the last 10
Yes,
years because you sort of see
absolutely.
the ups and downs, and you're like, I like this thing, but it failed, and then I didn't like this thing and it succeeded. And it's like over and over again, it kind of being dragged on a roller coaster. But, I think at the end of the day, I feel like I don't think anyone is going to treat Joaquin Phoenix as the definitive Joker, but that's also not a problem. I don't think he should be the definitive Joker. This is kind of a take on it. It is somebody's idea inspired by the concept, and then they went and did their own thing. And okay, this is what happened, right?
Yeah,
This is where we ended up, and that's my
exactly.
view of it.
I think everybody still agrees that Heath Ledger and Mark Hamill's voice are the definitive Jokers in the DCU.
Yeah, and then it remains to be seen what happens with Barry Keoghan, right, who played
Yeah,
Joker very briefly in the Matt Reeves movie. So yeah,
very
I
briefly.
mean,
I wonder if he
do you
appears
have?
in the second one.
Yeah, I
Wonder if
think
he
like Matt Reeves said that he will not be the main villain of the second one, but he
yeah.
may appear. So yeah, do you have any final thoughts about Joker Folie do Tina?
No, really. Maybe we could just give a bit of teasing snippets about some of the Easter eggs. I'm just gonna flash about Harvey Dent, and he's. Some people are asking like, did he suffer any damage on his face in this movie?
Yes, he does, but it's kind of subtle. So
Yeah.
there's a big explosion, and then they kind of you see him on the floor, and the scars are more on one side of his face than the other. But it's also not truly terrible. Like his face is not entirely
Yeah,
burnt.
right, lor.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
I
just like
think
an Easter egg for us.
and I guess like the other thing is you're seeing Harvey Dent who maybe he becomes Two-Face completely independent of Batman. So that was kind of the problem that Gotham also had. It's like all of these villains are having their origins before Batman is on the scene.
Yeah, right.
So
Before
that's
Batman
kind of the
became.
problem of making a movie about the Batman characters in a world where Batman is
Yeah,
10 years old,
we
Yeah.
will discuss briefly about that before we wrap up. And then the next
Okay.
thing is I did really appreciate the Looney Tunes part of it though, because it's like a childhood throwback on how I used to watch cartoons on TV, and the Pepe Le Pew sequence that they watch on the TV in a prison. It's,
Yeah, that
it's
the
a lot
inmates
like
have
what
Looney
it's a lot
Tunes on
like
the
the
TV.
dynamics that is happening with Arthur and Harley.
Yeah.
Although it's kind of reverse at this point.
Right, yeah, it is like she is chasing him, and
Yeah.
she is taking him on. Yeah, and it's like we saw the opening shot by Sylvester
Mm,
May that is also very indebted to Looney Tunes. And then in that scene in that cartoon, you see the cartoon of Joker. He's walking through the backstage of Maury's show, and he's passing by these posters of these old musicals,
yeah.
including like Sweet Charity and all of these things. And they use the songs from those musicals later on.
Yeah.
So the movie is kind of taking a little bit more of a 60s influence when the first one was doing more of a 70s
Yeah.
and 80s influence, especially with the characterization of Harley.
Harley, yeah.
And it's
I
kind of
did
like
I
her
did like
presentation
that
stuff.
they actually tried. They tried to,
Yeah, I
give her
like the
some.
costume. Yes,
I
this
thought I
costume that
like
you're
this
showing
one.
now.
Yes.
Yeah. Because
I
I
don't know
think
whether
for
people will
me,
cosplay this or not.
right? Yeah, because the
Yeah.
classic Harley design is the Harley Quinn jumpsuit.
Yeah.
And it is red and black. It's got a diamond. So red and black got a diamonds. Like I remember when they announced the Margot Robbie costume from Suicide Squad. I was like, what's this? This doesn't look like
I know,
any Harley
right?
Quinn costume. Yeah. So
But then it
yeah, I
became
mean,
popular as well with her blue and
yes, yeah.
pure Indian. You know,
So
you can't tell.
give me diamonds, yeah. And
Some
then
people,
in the James Gunn Suicide Squad movie, she is wearing costumes that are a lot closer, that
yeah,
have more red, emphasize more of
yeah,
the red. So I like
all
that.
right.
So yeah, I think definitely the production design, the costume design in this movie, I think is good. I think like they are creating. Okay, I believe this world that takes us in, but the rumored budget is $200 million, which is
Yeah,
this movie.
I read that.
And it doesn't feel like $200 million. Like there are no alien spaceships descending from the
Yeah,
sky,
I mean,
attacking.
it's mostly like very grim, realistic police uniform, prisoner uniform,
Yeah.
and
So
then normal street
maybe some
people.
of it is the famous Hollywood accounting, right? Where they're like magically the movie cost this much to justify. That happens all the
I
time.
wonder how much do
Yeah.
I need to sell my soul if I will become an accountant in Hollywood.
Right? Yeah. Like and then it's very when there are those cases where the lawsuits happen and you have to see the expense sheets, like in
Then
the
there'll be
Sahara
law and
case,
order.
yeah, the Matthew McConaughey Sahara. And then they were like, this is how much a bottled water costs, and then this is also how
Yeah,
much
yeah,
we
yeah,
set
yeah.
aside for bribes for the government of the country that they were filming the movie in, the kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, the prediction is they're going to make quite a big loss on this
Yeah, I'm
because
sure
it
it's gonna
costs three
be a
times the
loss.
first film, and it's not going to
Because
make the same
most
number.
of the time, I think in the US they really judge on the first weekend because that's where the
Yes.
excitement builds up.
And
And
they
then
talk about a multiplier, how much it
yeah,
multiplies after the weekend.
because for them, the country is so big, so a lot of cities do not have their own theaters as well.
Yeah,
They really have to drive to a larger town, in order to watch a movie that they really want. So it takes a lot of commitment for somebody to go and watch a movie if you're not in a big city in the US, and it's not cheap either. So that's how it is, and that's why they're judging by the first weekend, I suppose. Like how
yeah.
excited are you to watch this movie?
And I
That
think
kind of
it's also like it's a big word of mouth thing.
yeah.
So the word of mouth being negative, it will affect it. I mean, yeah, I wanted to mention a bit earlier. I, guest lecture at the film studies course in the Polytechnic, and we have so many students choose to do their assignment on Joker. Like a lot of students choose that movie as a movie that they analyze to do their video essay.
Why
And
did you ask why?
okay, the reason is I think this is the first kind of exposure that a lot of these students who are 16 or 17, they have to like a quote unquote serious movie. So it's
Eh?
like this is the comic book, a serious version of a comic book movie. And so they are seeing this, but they're seeing it, of course, before they know about Taxi Driver and Raging Bull and Homecoming and all these things like this. So it's like, okay, this is the first time we are seeing like a serious kind of psychological movie. And because it is in a franchise movie dressing, it becomes more accessible in a way,
I get
right?
it.
So and I feel like it's I guess it's a bit similar to how a lot of us will watch Star Wars before we go back and watch things like Hidden Fortress, and look at all the different influences on Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, and it was kind of funny because when Joker was coming out, it was at the height of like Martin Scorsese says Marvel movies are not cinema.
Yeah.
And this is a comic book
Yeah,
movie that desperately wants to be a Martin Scorsese movie. And the thing that I was saying at the time is the origin of Battle Cat in He-Man is Mattel had a tiger lying around from Big Jim's Safari Trail. And they're like, we'll paint the tiger green and that will be the thing that He-Man writes. And that's what the first movie is, if to put it kind of bluntly. We will paint the DC movie in the Scorsese kind of colors.
Yeah.
Right. And I think they managed to get him on as an executive producer or something because like it is produced by Bradley Cooper, the first one. Right. And who of course has a relationship with Todd Phillips through Hangover. And he also appeared in War Dogs and all this. And I think at one point they were saying, could Bradley Cooper play Joker? Like I think Warner Brothers, they wanted Leonardo DiCaprio. And then in the end, like, so Joaquin Phoenix saying yes to Joker in 2019 actually felt like a very big deal because he has always avoided franchise movies. Kevin Feige had been trying to get him very much. He wanted him for Hulk to replace Edward Norton. And then he also wanted him later for Doctor Strange. And Joaquin Phoenix had always said that it was the multiple movie contracts that Marvel always makes you sign that he didn't want to commit to. And that is why he didn't join the MCU. So this actually is his first sequel in his career. In all the years that he has been acting, right, he has never made a direct sequel. So this also feels like it's kind of an anomalous thing in this
I mean,
movie.
we do agree that the two of them are good performers. So it's kind of, I'm quite disappointed that they made Lady Gaga just like a prop in this movie. But okay,
Yeah.
so we have to discount her because she basically was, but Joaquin, you do feel that he's doing a really very good performance of someone in need and someone in trouble. I think I do feel a lot of feeling for what he's trying to portray, you know. But as a whole, like as we say about the movie, then other things surrounding it. But to say that he didn't perform very well is not true, lah. I think he did a very good job.
Yeah, the difficulty of specifically this version of the character is that you
Yeah,
are supposed to feel that he is pathetic, but you're also supposed to have pity on him, empathize with him, and kind of relate what he's going through to your own life struggles. But also, you're supposed to find him kind of scary. And all of these things need to happen at the same time. And so I think he is doing his best to make
yeah,
those elements in one character.
yeah. I think for that kind of layered performance, right, on the big screen, right, not many people can do that as effectively as he does, I should say, because it takes a lot of nuance and the kind of certain kind of style I think that Joaquin can do. His style.
Yeah. Like he's famously kind of a difficult person to work
Yeah,
with, like he will
method
have very
actor.
intense moods, and I think they said that Lady Gaga also, she was method acting, like she also
Mm,
told everyone on the set to call her Lee and not call her Lady Gaga. And but I think it just feels like it's run its course. It feels like we can't do anything with this anymore.
yeah,
It's all kind of run out of
yeah,
steam, and then by
yeah,
the
I
end of the
know.
movie you're like, I don't want
But actually, not
Oscar
just
to
to put it
change.
simply, lah, when I go to watch a movie, I don't want something so depressing and dreary.
And I think you can do a movie that has something to say, that is making a statement, and you can do a movie that has an interesting take on the material without it being depressing. So I think a lot of times the producers or filmmakers get in their heads that to be an Oscar movie, to be an awards movie, we have to be depressing, right? And then
Yeah,
that is what
sad,
will give us
dire, black and
So
white.
right? So I mean, if you think about Titanic, and okay, this is a funny comparison to draw, but Titanic, part of the reason why it was so successful was it actually managed to somehow have a happy ending by having, at the end when Rose goes to heaven and Leonardo DiCaprio is on the stairs and all the people are there in the ship, like it's just it did have a sad ending. We know that they died, right, and she dies, but the ending has like a reunion, and so you send
Yeah.
the audience out feeling good about it.
I mean, it's an adaptation anyway, so they kind of
Yeah,
make it into a romance, so people always like a good romance,
and
no matter
so
how
the
cynical you
tragic,
are.
right,
Yeah,
the tragic elements of that movie in the
correct.
end are balanced by you still have a good feeling and you want to come back and watch it again. And Titanic
Yeah,
made so much money from repeat viewings, so that was
yeah.
a rare example of a movie that was a big awards winner that also was a very big hit with the public. And it
Mm.
feels like since then it has been very difficult to duplicate that.
Very,
Yeah,
very. I think I
that
tend
it
to feel that
feels like
they're trying to strive for either like a very dark realism in these 5 years or so. Then I find that sometimes I during the movie theater, I find it very difficult to just enjoy. And I think the first movie that I really enjoyed this year, as you said, was Deadpool and Wolverine. Yeah, I don't
yeah,
care about the fan service when it felt good.
yeah, because
I had fun.
it's when and it's when the characters appear and they make their surprise appearances and everybody cheers. It's a good feeling. It's a nice feeling,
Yeah.
So I mean, like everybody always talks about in Endgame the moment when Cap catches Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, and that is a big cheer feeling. And I feel like you go to a movie, you want to have that feeling. It doesn't mean that every movie should be that 100% of the time, but also it means that if you're not providing that in some measure, it feels like you wasted your time, you wasted your money.
Yeah, I know, right?
So
You need some
and
relief, lah.
especially in the case of this movie where the marketing is kind of deceptive, where people didn't know they are being sold a musical. And so
Exactly.
I mean, for me, I was like, I like musicals. If it's a musical, I am interested to see how it works. But so the reason that I dislike it in the end is not because it is the musical. It's partially because I feel like it didn't go far
It
enough
wasn't
with being a
musical
musical.
enough.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that is like, yeah, I want them to like
No,
fly, you know, I
I
got
think
them to like
I'm kind of like
explode in
you in a
color and
sense.
things like that.
I didn't mind it was a musical. I was like, okay, this could be an interesting take,
Yeah.
because yeah. I mean, I'm not full musical fans, but I do appreciate certain musicals. I'm very fussy, but I also like how musicals can take things on to another level in terms of storytelling. But yeah, this one was
With
just
the
not. It was all
stylization.
over the
And
place. Yeah.
like I
So
think
anyway,
like Barbie also was a good example of a movie that's
yes, that
using the
was good.
style,
Yeah.
a very fake looking style, to exaggerate and to give
Yeah.
you a very heightened emotion. Yeah.
And everybody remembers the song after that.
Yes.
Okay, now we have actually arrived at about the end point. But before that, I think we're going to extend a little, since we're talking about villain stories. What, uh, and this one doesn't really work to general public and comic book lovers and pop culture movie watchers. So, what do you think would be okay, let me rephrase. What are the kinds of villain stories that work and what don't? In
Yeah.
your
So
like, how would
I
you
think
want to portray a story in a movie, not on TV, let's say a big screen, about a villain and it's glorious and it works? And what are the elements that just can't work?
so. I think what has resonated a lot with people is the perspective flip, is the idea of a misunderstood villain. So this is popularized by things like Wicked, right? Which is trying to tell you that the Wicked Witch of the
Mm,
West, actually she's misunderstood
yeah.
and she's an outcast. And this whole time, we are hearing the story told from the Good Witch's perspective, but it's wrong. And there's been several like versions of that. There's one that exists for Jafar,
Yes.
and then you talk about Maleficent being a very big
Yes.
example, and then Cruella. So I think these are stories where you take the character and you're trying to say actually what you have been told is wrong, and it's been exaggerated. I think the
Yeah.
problem is that there are certain lines that a character crosses where it's hard to empathize with them. Like for Cruella, if you said this Cruella is the same one who kills dogs, it's very difficult
Yeah.
for people to
Very
like her. So
difficult.
instead, the movie has to tell you that actually that is a lie, that's an exaggeration, right?
But it's also
So
becoming a trope. So, like they
yeah,
use it too often and then it becomes kind of like surface level,
so I
very
think like
lame
what
kind of
people
thing.
people enjoy villains who are, and of course the new Lion King movie is going to do that as well. It's going to give you
Yeah,
an
I
origin
know.
of Scar,
Like, do we
and
need
then
this?
Transformers One gives you an origin for Megatron. Like it shows the relationship
Yeah.
between Megatron and
That
Optimus
was
Prime.
okay. That was
Were
quite well
friends.
done, I thought.
I've
That
not
was
seen
not
that.
bad.
Yeah,
Oh, you haven't
I'm
seen that?
I'm
Okay.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, so I think this idea of okay, actually you don't know the full story. That is what draws people in. The problem is that you cannot make someone side completely with a person who is like a homicidal maniac. So I think people like villains because villains are dramatic, because villains can get away with things that heroes can't get away with. It is entertaining to watch them. You like to watch a villain who revels in it, is having a lot of fun, sort of cackling evilly to themselves. But also, I think people want to feel, all right, I want to understand how could a person get to this place, what motivates them, what are the circumstances in their life that lead them here, and then kind of understand. So I think those are the kind of two sides, and sometimes it's very difficult for those two sides to go together. Like there's some people who just want evil for evil's sake, but then there are other people who want to know the backstory. And I mean, the big example is Loki. Like Loki is very popular because they show that poor little thing, right? So sad. He was mistreated when he was young, and all of this. He was a frost giant, and then like Thor was a popular brother, and then kind of feel sorry for him. But he is also uh, done some terrible things, and he is like kind of a mischievous. But then by the end of his story, he redeems himself, right? By the end of Loki season 2, he is like actually fully a hero. So I think that's the thing. The thing is that the more you understand and the more you empathize with the villain, it's harder for them to say in a pure villain rank.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's very like no matter what, it becomes a trope. Like there will be some kind of redemption story in the end. If
And
you like
yeah, and
this villain.
another example that most people will feel is not very well done, but you and I like it okay, is Black Adam, that takes place within
Yeah.
DC. So Black Adam is traditionally a villainous character,
The
but
morally gray.
right, yeah, but because he is, adopted by Dwayne Johnson, he basically becomes a hero in the movie. He is kind of like Terminator, where he has like a little kid following him around and all this. So the movie doesn't really let him be a villain,
Yeah.
and because it is being used as a vehicle for a movie star. So I think that is another example of you're taking or I mean, you look at Venom, right? So Venom, he is basically not a villain. He is like a lovable kind of like loser. He's a monster, but he's also like
Lonely
he's not, yeah,
monster.
yeah. and then it becomes like this accidental comedy. So I feel like when you center the villains in the story, but especially when you don't have the hero that they're traditionally up against, like the
Yes.
Venom movies don't have Spider-Man and Joker doesn't have Batman because
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne is a little
So
kid,
in the
right?
end, even though I love villains, right? I really like villains. Like they, as you say, are very dramatic and they are very memorable. They have their one-liners,
Yeah, you have a big villain song, like
whatever.
Hellfire and Hunchback of
Yeah.
Notre
And
Dame or Be
it's
Prepared
also
in
an
Lion
escapism
King.
to the kind of confines that we need to be in the social sphere. So it
Yeah,
takes me out into a
the
different
villain can be rude, the
possibility.
villain can
Yeah,
be
what villain
mean,
can do.
yeah.
But then again, then you know that the villains in most stories can't exist very well without their counterpart, which is the hero. And even though the hero may be a bit lame one, but there needs to be one, so that
Yeah.
there is a reason for the villain to continue and for the world to be not a very chaotic place, and then there's no reason for any of us to go on living, if everyone's doing everything that they like.
Yeah,
um
and I think like another very popular permutation of superhero stories is recently Evil Superman, which you
ah
see in
yes.
Invincible and
Oh,
The Boys, and it's kind of like, what
so
if
many,
actually
yeah,
the guy
yeah,
who is protecting you, what if the heroes, they are themselves no standards,
yeah,
right? So that is like the flip side. And it is a result, it is a very cynical view, but it's also a reaction to many decades of there being this one formula.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that is in a way another story about
Yeah.
villains.
So that's why I feel that villain stories by itself don't really stand out very much. Uh, the one that I'm actually most disappointed are not even these. The one that I'm most disappointed is Maleficent, because I always thought Maleficent should just be evil as she is. Like,
Yeah,
a witch is a witch. A neighbor witch is
yeah,
a neighbor
I
witch.
like
I don't
I
think
like
yeah, you give, like, she lost her agency and her
that it's
coolness.
about a boy, so that was the
Yeah.
thing that made a lot of people kind of feel,
I was
and then
like,
and
what?
she doesn't get to turn into a dragon. It's
It's not
Diaval who
like
turns
you're
into a
giving
dragon.
woman power, right, and yeah, you're taking it away, and then just to make her look good. I don't think you feel there is a reason to do that. And yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
Cruella, also another lame one.
I like both Maleficent movies. I think the second one people did like, but the second one I like it because it's Michelle Pfeiffer versus Angelina Jolie, and I found it
Yeah.
to be very entertaining. And Michelle Pfeiffer gets to be the villain. She gets to be like
Yes.
kind of like a Game
Yes.
of Thrones queen.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Exactly.
that
So well, the
that
first
that
one
one was
disappointed me really,
because it's like,
really,
oh, the
really.
surprise is because the boy broke her heart, that kind of thing.
Ah,
Yeah, so I yeah that's and I feel like we are going to see a similar reaction to Mufasa the Lion King.
Mufasa.
Yeah, where they're doing like the origin of Scar. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the thing is like we always have to remember that the villains exist in reaction and imbalance with
Mm.
heroes.
There are
And
certain ones that do work on its own, but then sometimes it has to be more historical in context. Then it's not like a pop culture character. What I'm thinking of is the Dick Lee's musical, A Forbidden City, about Cixi.
right,
That
yeah,
one
because
works.
she's
I mean,
usually depicted
you
as a
know,
villainous, and then
yeah, because
the
everyone
musical
thinks that
giving her
in a
more. But yeah,
typical Chinese drama, right, Cixi is always the villain. She murders her another concubine, her daughter-in-law, and things like this. But then, and all the bad things said about her. But is it true? In the end, we do know it's a patriarchal world anyway. So but if she was how did she get the power? It wasn't very easy, that kind of thing. I think that kind of story works historically, because we know how the world is in that culture and in that era. But for superhero, where you can write about anything that you want, right? And have that iconic villain in context to the heroes, it just kind of makes it not as strong a movie if you're just talking about the villain. It's like you need Batman and Joker. Then it comes with a very interesting story, right? Um,
Yeah.
you need Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi. You have
Right.
an
Yeah.
interesting story there.
And that is a good example of
Yeah.
telling us the villain story, and it is a story that in the end most people kind of feel sympathetic towards Anakin, and they kind of understand why did he end up in this place, and he was manipulated by Palpatine, and he was motivated by his love for Padme and all of this. So yeah, I think but then at the same time, a lot of people hated the prequels because it felt like it destroyed the mystique of Darth Vader. It felt like it took away from the power of Darth Vader when you see him as a little boy. So this is again the danger of doing the perspective flip and sort of going and telling the backstory, is you're going to alienate some people because they feel like, hey, now this new information that I have is not compatible with the vision of this character that I have in my mind. And I think that is, you're going to face that anytime you do one of these stories.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Anyway,
I
this is
think
a very interesting take on
that's interesting.
villains.
Like,
Yeah,
I think, in a postmodern world, right, there's no black and white. There's always like nuance, there's shades of gray, and those things are what makes a story interesting, right? It's like
mm,
the villain is not all bad, the hero is not all good. But
yeah,
so I think at the same time, a lot of these stories work also in a very classical way,
yeah.
in a way that is very like, you kind of get into the formula and you can identify the types, and I think that gives people comfort, but it also
Mhm,
makes it exciting when you switch the elements up, when you kind of play
yeah,
with things a little bit. So it is just a matter of how far do you take it, how much do you turn and change the
yeah,
character when you are
yeah.
telling a story like that.
Okay, so in order to wrap up again, generally both of us kind of like don't think that the Joker 2 movie is that great, but it wasn't so terrible that
Yeah,
it
we're not
was
ripping chairs out
horrible.
of the
Yeah,
cinema like
yeah,
it sounds like
we're
people are
not gonna
doing.
flip
Yeah.
tables.
Sounds like people are reacting like, like they're listening to
Yeah, yeah.
Stravinsky's Rite of
Take
Spring for
it
the
with
first
a
time.
bit
Yeah.
of pinch of salt with all those things that you read on the internet. um, it is a musical, and yet it's not musical enough. That's what we both feel as well. So you can watch the movie if you are into that kind of thing, but I don't think you would enjoy it if you are thinking
You
that
have to know
it's
what
gonna
you're
be,
getting. If you know what
yeah.
you're getting and you're
Then
not
you can sit
expecting
through.
like a thing
It's
that
gonna be long
isn't,
though, so get prepared. If the movie theater is cold, bring something
yeah,
warm.
wear a jacket. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jedd, for joining me. I'm gonna put you off screen
You're
for a
welcome,
while
Tina.
while I say goodbye to the people out there. Thank you for joining us and watching or listening to us talk about Joker sequel movie that's out this week. And for the next live with Red Dot Diva, I'm not too sure what I have in mind yet. Things have been very busy and hectic on my side, but I do have something planned, and I'm hoping to be able to schedule something before the year ends. The next two big events that you might interest you locally will be Gamescom, coming on the third week of October. So if you're a gaming fan, don't miss that event happening on Suntec. And then by the end of the year, we have Singapore Comic Con, where all the comic book guests are appearing. Some of them which I've announced in my kind of like listed in my blog, the latest blog article. You have Mike Zack, Michael Gaydos, uh, Joe Rubinstein, and so many others from the Scott's Collectibles agency. And I think there would be more announced because they're slowly rolling up the list of guests. And of course, those who love Power Rangers, there are a couple of the celebs who will be there as well, meeting guests. But you need to book the slots on the website, and you can check that all out in the Singapore Comic Book Comic Con's Facebook page. They're not very active on social media. I think they mostly post on their Facebook page, unfortunately. So that's why I try to replicate what they announce on my blog so you can read it off-site if you're not a Facebook person. I know a lot of people feel that Facebook is for older people. So you don't really like to be on Facebook as well because it floods uh, your feed with a lot of political views or so forth. So if you don't want to get on Facebook to see what Singapore Comic Con has to offer, you can check out my blog and search under SGCC. You should be able to see some of the articles there. It's kind of fun to meet all the local comic book fans and pop culture people, cosplayers and local creators on the show floor. I know tickets are a bit expensive this year, but if you can afford it and you haven't been to SGCC before, just drop by one day and go around and find out that there are a lot of creative people actually locally as well as in the region. We may not be as glitzy as San Diego Comic Con. We don't have like flashy trailer previews or panels with celebs, unfortunately, but it's kind of like a homecoming for many of us. I think when we meet each other for that one time of the year, it's kind of you kind of feel that you belong to a certain tribe, and I think that's a very good feeling. So come join us. I've been wandering the floor on 2 days, capoing around, saying hi to people and making new friends. So I'm going to bring Jedd on board again, and we're going to say goodbye. Thanks for listening to us. I know we ramble a lot, but I think we enjoy rambling. Sorry. Because we like to talk about movies, so and we like to talk about these characters. So thank you for joining us. If there's a new live with Red Dot Diva events, you see the announcement on my social media, which is on Facebook and on Threads as well. I kind of like not on X anymore. Very little. It's becoming too spammy. You can't block people sooner or later, and there's a lot of bad actors in there, which I don't appreciate. So yeah, just check out and also subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't. The live stream is also there for you to watch as and when. And for Jedd, do you want to let people know where they can follow you?
Sure, yeah. On Instagram, my movie review account is Jedd the Movie Guy. Yes, it's on the scroll. And then I also have a personal Instagram page that is Jedd the Jedi. So JEDDPHEJEDI. I'm mostly there. I don't post very much, but yeah, you will see my movie reviews and stuff like that. And then I am also on Threads. I am not active on X. But yeah, I am mostly active on the Facebook like an old person.
Unfortunately, somehow, even though they say old people, right? Maybe the young people are not interested in interacting with us for many reasons. Maybe we are not on TikTok. We are not so attention deficit. So we tend to ramble. But then again, right? Even though I have the most reactions or interactions on Facebook, so I can't get away from it. And people who are on Facebook interact with me or with you are genuine people. They are like people who you would meet or have met before, and you just don't want to lose these connections. So that's how it is.
Oh, I'm also on Letterboxd. If anyone uses Letterboxd, Jedd the Movie Guy there as well. Yes.
All right. So yeah, try to support us. I mean, we are trying to make our voices heard. It's a local geek, and also to put our voices out there as part of the Southeast Asian region to balance off all the views from more bigger countries who tend to flood your feed. So we are trying to just rock the algorithm slightly. Anyway, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next time, and good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.